Hans, here's what I'd like to know. Do the European creditors, does the Eurogroup, if you will, or the Euro Summit, feel more confident about negotiating with some kind of coalition? Because that's almost inevitably what we're going to find in Greece a few days from now, because once Syriza rebels, mutinies, which is about to happen, in order to get this, as this bill passes Parliament, Tsipras' mandate within his own party has to have evaporated.
You know, Eric, this might be a slightly paradoxical answer, but they don't really care. They say that's an issue, that's a challenge for the Greek government, that is not necessarily what they need to be occupying themselves with. What they need to be occupying themselves with is their end of the conditionality, and that is if this preliminary agreement, this really agreement to move forward, passes the Greek parliaments and then passes their parliaments, then we can move forward. The idea that Mr. Tsipras was forced to sign some pretty difficult terms, everyone here, there's not a lot of sympathy for Mr. Tsipras because in some ways that was a grave of his own digging.
Mike, let's talk for a moment about the fact that, you know, what Hans just alluded to. There is this deal in principle, and I suppose those who feared a Grexit ought to be relieved this morning. But there's a lot that has yet to happen.
Well, of course, they've got to get it through their parliament in Athens, and then 6 European parliaments have to agree that then they start a bailout deal negotiation. It's important to realize this is not a bailout deal. These are only preconditions to even start talks. So a lot has to go forward before we get to the point where we can say Grexit is not an option anymore. It's still out there.
What about the capital controls? We were told over the weekend that the capital controls are going to remain in place, but there might be a lifting on the cap on bank withdrawals.
Yeah, well, the ECB...
But for the time being, the ECB isn't doing anything.
The ECB did nothing. They kept the aid in place but didn't raise it today, and that's likely going to be their stance until we see what happens on Wednesday. If the Greeks get through this through Parliament, they will probably agree to give them a little bit more money, but it's still going to be very hard to open the banks until there's some certainty. If you were a Greek, would you put money back into the banks,
no,
or would you continue taking it out?
I wonder, deposits are probably zero, and when you say they kept the aid in place, well, that's not really anything because the aid has all been used up. So, yes, they still have an $89 billion line of credit, but they've drawn all of that line and given out almost all of the cash. I'm hearing the banks may have enough money to continue dispersing cash in the next 2 or 3 days. Hans, let me ask you, you spoke with the Finnish finance minister earlier this morning. I watched that, and he said no bridge financing. There is, he repeated 3 or 4 times, to be clear, no bridge financing, but they'll talk about that this afternoon and tonight.
Yeah, so right now, finance ministers are meeting on this idea of bridge financing. What I heard Mr. Stubbs say was no bridge financing without conditionality. But that means that to have initial, to say it's 10 or 15 billion, whatever price tag you say to get them through August, that is part of a separate deal that will also require, as I say, prior actions from the Greek government. One other interesting aspect of that Mr. Stubb interview, he's, of course, the Finnish finance minister, he said that a bank bailout would not be coming from the ESM. The banks have a huge cash problem right now. They have a shortage of a massive magnitude. How they figure out some sort of way to get to mainline cash from either the ECB or from some liquidity line into the Greek banks is a huge question. It's an open one. And so far, no one's provided any sort of concrete or comprehensive actions. Guys?
Mike, back to you here in New York City. Let's draw a distinction, if we can, between the politics of these negotiations and this deal in principle and the economics. What are the economics of what Mr. Tsipras had to agree to this weekend?
Well, Greece had started to grow by the end of last year. Now they're back into recession. And there's going to be a lot more pain in the short run if they pass these reforms because they're going to be raising taxes and they're going to be cutting pension payments. Now, down the road, what people are saying is Germany has forced German-style labor market and business reforms onto the Greek economy, and over the longer term, that should be good for the economy to help it grow. They want this $50 billion bailout fund, put the assets of Greeks into a fund so they can sell them off. That was supposed to be done in the 2010 agreement. The water utility for one, the electric utility for another. They're mentioned specifically by name. They agreed to do that in 2010 and never did it. What Tsipras did get out of this is an agreement that they can take the proceeds, put them back into the banks, put them back into some of the productivity-enhancing investments in Greece. So over the longer run, it should help Greece grow, but they'll have some short-term pain.
I got to jump in and ask, Hans, I heard a lot about this $50 billion fund, privatization fund over the weekend. A lot of politicians, a lot of finance ministers skeptical that the Greeks have assets that are worth $50 billion if you don't include like the Acropolis and Mykonos. I mean, do they really have utilities worth $50 billion?
It's aspirational. So if you listen to the way a variety of both prime ministers, chancellors, and finance ministers have been talking about that $50 billion, it's pretty clear that's a target. That's the number they want to get to. Now, valuing those assets is going to be a massive fight, and that's one of the reasons why initially they wanted to put it in Luxembourg. Now it's going to be administered, it's going to be housed in Athens, and it'll be supervised. The supervision will come from the EU. But look, that number, I don't want to call it funny money, but that's the goal, and that's where they want to get. Half of that money is supposedly where the bank rescue is going to come to. So even if you don't get to 50, you still need to find $25 billion for the banks.
Got it. All right, so we'll agree not to call it funny money. Putting a value on those assets, though, should be pretty easy, right? Whatever people are willing to pay for them is how much they're worth.
It's going to take a while to figure that out.